republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Tonight, we have Michelle Devine, who's in the audience, running for the Board of Ed. Welcome. Is there any public comment? Okay. Hearing none, we can move on to our consent agenda. Does anyone have any additions, corrections, or questions? Anyone care to make a motion to approve it?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Tom, I don't think we have any correspondence.
None to report.
We're on to your report.
Sure. Delighted tonight to start off superintendent's report with a presentation from the team at Quaker Hill. They are going to be presenting on their Junior Explorers program, which is a special ed program there. You know, this is often a topic of conversation throughout the year, not only from an instructional standpoint, but certainly a what's best for kids standpoint, but also a budgetary standpoint when we talk about the efficiencies and what's best for kids in terms of running an in-district program. So you're going to hear some highlights tonight from a wonderfully successful program at Quaker Hill. It is a district program, so while it's housed at Quaker Hill, there are students from time to time from across the town of Waterford in that program. And I know Chris has a whole team here tonight, and certainly our Director of Pupil Services is here, Kathy Malone, as well. But Chris, it's all yours.
All right. Well, as Tom said, we're really proud of this program. This is our second year that the Junior Explorers program has been at Quaker Hill. When it first came over, we did want to change the name. It was called the Autism Program, and we just thought there'd be a better description for the kind of things that happen inside the room. And so actually Mr. Lloyd's here, who runs the Explorers program at the middle school. So we said, you know, a good logical progression would be to call it the Junior Explorers program. So in a nutshell, we think it's best to provide kids with individualized instruction that they really need to learn, while at the same time teaching them in an environment in their own community with, you know, kids that live on their street and in their town. We think it's really best for them. So we have Mrs. McLaughlin, Sarah McLaughlin, who's the special education teacher in that room, and then also Rose Gata, who's the BCBA that works really close with that students in that room as well. We also have a parent. We have Mr. Rusi, who has a daughter in the class who's been so gracious as to let us use some of the video and photos from the room, as well as the other parents. So we'd like to thank them for allowing us to use some of those videos and photos for the presentation. All right, Sarah.
So as Tom mentioned, our Junior Explorers program is a Waterford-wide program. So we have students from Oswegatchie, from Great Neck, and from Quaker Hill, all housed in our classroom at Quaker Hill. The two really big parts of our program are, as Chris mentioned, individualized instruction. So all of our students are really working in a one-on-one environment on the very specific language skills, functional skills, and behavioral skills they need to be successful. So whatever it is that that student needs, we're going to create or find to best suit their needs. The second part, again, as Chris alluded to, that is really special about our program is that often these types of intensive support programs require students to be educated outside of their community. And we're so lucky here in Waterford that these children are able to be in class with their peers, they're able to go on field trips, to go to specials, to go to lunch and recess, and really stay in their community and get those intensive supports that they need. This year we have 6 students, and they range from grades K to 5. So we're so proud of this program being in Waterford and at Quaker Hill, and we're really excited to share all that's going on.
So we have some of our staff members here. You can see assisting some of our kiddos. We have quite a few paraprofessionals who are also either in school to be certified special education teachers or are special education teachers themselves. In addition to Sarah being the special ed teacher in the room, we'll find out tomorrow. She passed the BCBA exam, so she would be a certified BCBA specialist, as well as Rose. So we have quite a bit of talent in the room helping these kids.
And those initials stand for?
Board Certified Behavior Analyst.
Thank you.
So some of our program goals that we really focus on every single day are, as I teaching things in really a one-to-one, highly individualized environment. So if one student really needs to work on expressive language, we're creating specific programs for what they need to work on. They're being taught one-to-one with either myself or a paraprofessional. And everything is completely tailored to them, as we'll show, from the materials to the data we're collecting to the presentation of the materials. You know, there's no textbook or curriculum for us. We really make it to fit every single child and their needs. A big part of our program, which Chris will talk about later, is the students being really visible members of our Quaker Hill communities. So they're getting this intensive support, and they're also members of the community. Life skills are a big thing as well, so especially for our older students, thinking about them moving on in their lives, we focus on vocational and functional skills that they'll need. So we do quite a lot of toileting. We teach, as you'll see later, you know, vocational stocking skills. We teach hanging clothing, folding clothing, things that they'll need to be successful over their whole lifespan. So that is another special element of our program.
All right. So we have a variety of data structures in place within our program, as I'm sure you can imagine. What I think is really important to share is we are not just collecting data on behaviors that we're targeting for decrease, so our problem behaviors. We're also collecting data on skill acquisition. So we're looking to see are students beginning to demand or request more across environments? Are they starting to label things within their environment? We chart our data in a visual analysis so that we're able to see if our interventions are actually being effective. And while we're doing that, we make it a point to ensure that we're kind of accounting for any and all other variables that could impact the behavior. So be it a student falling ill, a change in staff, a change in something within the home environment, so that we understand what really is impacting our students, be it negatively or positively. So you see we have a graph on the left here. It shows the daily instances of aggression that a student engages in across the school year. We also have, like I mentioned, one of the graphs where we're targeting a behavior for increase. So tacting is another way to say labeling something in the environment. So cup, pen, Mr. Giard. So we're looking to increase the language that our students are engaging in across the environment.
So a really important function of the paraprofessional is to get specific training on taking this data throughout the school day. So when they're out at special, they're seeing, is that child labeling things? They'll
Right.
check it off the list. You know, aggression, you know, are they swiping stuff off the table, we'll chart that on the
Sure.
list. And then we're constantly looking at the data and making sure the line's going in the right direction. Because if it's
Yeah.
not, we need to stop and change things. So it's very flexible. So again, the paras are a really critical piece of having active data.
Okay, so the best way to learn is often visually. So this is a video of me working with one of our kindergarten students. So this particular student is working on building his language skills. So both his ability to understand words that are spoken to him. So if I said, you know, go get the water bottle, he would know what a water bottle was. And also, as Rose mentioned, labeling things. So seeing a picture of a dog, knowing that that's dog, just increasing his language across the board. So you'll notice some things to key into are, it's taught in a one-on-one environment. It's really free of distractions. It's individualized to him. And also, he's getting tons of positive praise, and we're really keeping him on track, motivated, engaged for his work session.
What is the dog? What is it?
Dog.
What is it?
Dog.
Woo! Good job, buddy. That
And we're also taking the data, as you can see. So I'm marking every response he makes.
Show me
graphing.
dog. What is it?
Dog.
What is it?
Dog.
Woo! Good job, bud.
Aware of the videographer.
Liam, where's the pen? Good job. What is it?
Wait.
What is it?
Wait.
Perfect. You did a great job. Our last one, and we're gonna do it. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Where's house? What is this?
Dog.
What is it?
Dog.
Oh my
Awesome.
gosh.
Computer. Go ahead, buddy.
Good job, buddy.
So there's different, they choose different things to work for. A couple of big ones are, you know, some of the technology, but also visiting staff members. They'll have to pick through a bunch of photos. Pancoast is a big, our PE teacher, he's a big one they like to go visit. So they'll work to go visit different staff members throughout the building, which is pretty neat. We have another video here of another student. She she has like the cutest voice. And a pretty interesting way about how we're teaching students to read is a lot of the kiddos in Sarah's program, phonics doesn't really click with them, so they go right to teaching words. One's the Edmark program is one of the programs, but Sarah's actually created a bunch just herself. So you'll notice some of those pieces right there, and Amelia is doing an awesome job with her reading, and she's really flying with that. So anything else to add?
Yeah, so some things to kind of notice. So she has, this is called a token board. So basically it lets her know about how long she needs to work until she gets her break. So when she earns all 5s, you'll see the paraprofessional putting them on as she makes correct responses. That when she has all 5, she's able to take her break. So it helps students kind of track where they are within the session. And it makes it really a less aversive environment for them to learn in.
What word? Beautiful, good job.
So you notice she's making an error. We're not saying no or stop. She's correcting her and giving her a chance to do it correctly.
Good job. What word? What word? Good job. What word? Good job. What word? I'm good job. Token. What word? Mom, good job. What word? Ooh, token for you. What word? Good job. Token.
So again, you hear
Really flying
tons
through
of
that.
positive reinforcement throughout her session.
As we mentioned, it's really important to have all our students, no matter what their disability, to be involved throughout the school day and make modifications so they can participate. So even if it's a field trip that might be an all-day field trip, we want to set them up for success. So maybe for them it might be a half-day field trip, so we know that they can have a great time and a great experience. So we try to modify things as much as possible to help all of our students be successful. And in terms of being visible and involved, Mr. Rusi also helped his daughter launch a pie at my face the other day. I was actually happy it didn't hit me in the face because I got a lot. So that was fun. In terms of next steps, there's a lot of individualization that we do throughout the day. It does require quite a bit of investment in terms of staff and materials, and we thank the board and everyone for providing those. We're hoping to continue on with that. Is there any?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, there's kind of no textbook or no curriculum for our program, so a lot of things are completely staff-made with Rosemary and myself with the support of our paras. So this is kind of an example of some of the vocational tasks I referenced. So teaching kiddos who are getting ready to go into middle school how to stock shelves, how to hang things like that. Also, we have some pretty cool technology. So we have, this is a potty watch, and we used this, essentially just an interval timer, but we used it to successfully toilet train one of our students who had been in diapers for 6 years and never toilet trained. Now she's 100% trained. We have a couple different timers and clickers and counters to kind of help us track behavior, but our materials are both things that we buy and also things that our staff are really investing a lot of time in and a lot of effort to make for our kiddos.
Sarah's program's grown to 6 students, so we needed to move her into a bigger space. So as we get more kiddos, we kind of look at different spaces and how to accommodate them within the school. So with that, that's the end of our presentation. If you guys have any questions for us.
We welcome you to come visit us at any time, please.
Any questions? Thank you very much. You do great work.
Julia's. No, it's a comment. I think it's a great program. I'm so happy you're doing this for those students. And I love the idea that you're teaching them life skills, because that's something they'll need all throughout their life after they get out of school. So, thank you. And I will come visit.
Good, good.
Okay, Chris.
How many staff are in there aside from you?
6.
6 paras.
Mm-hmm.
How are the paras selected to go in there?
When we look at the paras for the school, we kind of divvy them up based on their skill set and their interest level. Sometimes when they really click with a kid, we keep them together. And we have a male in there who works really well with another male in there. We kind of keep those guys together. So it just kind of depends. It's on a case-by-case basis, really.
Okay, thank you. I want to come visit.
Thank you.
We're
Thanks.
excited to have
Thank you.
Just a final comment on the program. I think what's evident tonight is your looking at a highly competent, highly skilled, but compassionate team of people working with some of our most needy students. And I think it would be easy just to focus solely on life skills, but they are focusing on academic skills and making sure that they're developed as far academically as they can be. So it's an important balance.
I'm happy about the life skills too, though, that they're learning along with it.
And I know Mr. Lloyd carries that through at the middle school. I've seen his program in action as well, and certainly that goes on right through grade 12. A couple other info items. Wanted to provide you with a brief overview of a new curricular template we're introducing this year, as well as an assessment framework. Both of these items really grew out of work around the strategic plan. I know you've heard about that over the last 3 years, but it really is driving a great deal of what goes on in the district. And Craig's going to give you some background around the curricular framework and the assessment framework. Certainly we're open to questions and comments.
Thanks. So with respect to the curriculum update, Tom mentioned, levels of the strategic plan did drive this work. One of the levels was the creation and fusion of hot skills. So that's in our new format. Another one was feedback from the board in the sense of when they had approval of different curriculum, some questions. And another one was with our NEASC self-visit that with the new standards requiring vision of a graduate being articulated in curriculum, having assessment benchmarks in a curriculum, and having curriculum down to the unit level, never the lesson plan level, but the unit level are kind of additions. So with that, this is an overall process that when I meet with departments that are up for curricular renewal, currently starting this summer there are 5. So we had K-12 PE, K-12 health, 6 through 12 social studies, 6 through 8 language arts, and 9 through 12 math. I first start with, okay, here's the overall process. So the department head or curriculum leader meets with their team around what are the problems we want to solve. So either it's new standards, it is we know that our curriculum can be improved in such a way. So that discussion in the spring is the gap analysis, kind of from where we are to where we want to go, and that defines the work for the next 2 years. And you can see the bullet points of the questions that the team discusses with what is the work. Then we set the dates. We give them a choice of the kind of traditional 18-month approach, which means summer and 1 year, but as feedback from the Board of Ed and other curriculum teams that have come to us, we give the team an opportunity to do the 18 months to create the curriculum as a draft, and then a full year to pilot it so that everyone has a voice and there's feedback that goes that is given and enhancements made before it comes to the board for full adoption. So it's really 18 months or 2 years. And then we bring it here, the board for approval. And we have talked about other processes where maybe a high school course comes up as a one-off, like what do we do next? So then, what does this new format look like? The metaphor I use, it's kind of like a 3-act play, in the sense of the first act is, what are the standards? What's the meaning? What do we want students to know and be able to do? What transfer goals do we want to accomplish? And then next, we would start with, how are we going to assess? So what's the end product look like? And this is the classic UBD, or understanding by design, backwards planning, with what's the end product look like, and then how do we create that learning plan or that unit breakout to give teachers the requisite information to be successful in the curriculum. I have given you at your in your packets the kind of the 3-page overview, knowing that the third page could go on for many different units. So what does the first page look like? This is, again, what are the established goals? What are the transferable skills of the vision of a graduate? We talk about the meaning. That's really then the hot skills, the Bloom's taxonomy. We talk around what are the cross-disciplinary goals, if there are, and then what are the transfer skills. Next with the,
Quick question.
absolutely,
Right.
Marsh.
Is this, when you guys meet, do you meet pre-K through 12, for instance, in English, or do you break it up? Because certainly, the elementary, middle school, and high school levels are quite different, and might have, you know, your goals and everything might be a little different.
Absolutely. Yes. So let me give you some examples. So with the 4 cores, like for math, it's just high school. For language arts, it's just middle school. For social studies, where it's 6 through 12, I have a curriculum leader at the middle school, so I meet with the curriculum leader at the middle school, and I meet with the department head at the high school. And part of their journey, as an example, to make sure there's good vertical articulation, the middle school social studies team, as far as their PLC work, came up with what does the emerging 9th grader, or what do we hope to send to the middle school as the competent learner in social studies look like from a middle school perspective. The high school is actually going to be doing an exercise on what do they expect the incoming 9th grader to look like, and then we're going to see how close our middle school social studies team is and our high school team, so we know that there should, if it's perfectly aligned, then there's not that blame game of you didn't get us ready.
Right.
As well as the curriculum leader and department head talk around the commonalities of their work. So while they meet in school level groups or school band groups, because at elementary we meet at a school band, there is that communication from middle to high.
So in elementary, you're multi-subject.
So in elementary, if we do an elementary topic, it would be K-5 in that topic area.
Such as math.
Such as like math. Right now, for the only elementary work on the forefront is elementary PE, and one of the elementary PE goals is to include health, so it's not a topic that's a additional thing for the classroom teachers to do.
How did you pick PE, for instance?
Sure. So we're on a 5-year curriculum cycle, and maybe I should have put that up in the front. It's in our budget books annually, and so every year we basically have something new to do, and we balance the 5-year curriculum cycle with some curriculums that are financially going to cost a lot and some that are going to cost not as much, because we kind of lock the new textbook line statically, so we can kind of do that balance financially. Yeah.
Craig, and this is basically for high school level, and particularly science.
Sure.
How are the teachers educated on what are the trends for the new curriculum? Because and especially in a 2-year span, things can change in science fairly quickly.
Yeah.
So what are the science teachers basing the curriculum on, and where do they get that education from?
Sure. So, the staff shouldn't be surprised because it's a 5-year cycle of when they're coming up
Right.
for renewal. So the team knows when it's coming up. The department head really gets their team ready through the year in their PLC time around, if there's new standards. So like when the NGSS came out, the high school really did a deep dive. What is this new construct of learning? Because those standards were very different than the standards in the past. And then, we look for model either curriculum or model places out there We may send teachers to some workshops, maybe the science Hartford Science Center, and then get through that learning process. Then it's kind of like you're writing it, and if we need a consultant to work with a group, I always offer the opportunity with a curriculum leader, department head, do you need extra support? And then sometimes we find a consultant who's expert in that area and can kind of work with the team.
Okay, great. So
Along the way.
there's funding for that in the math and sciences and the STEM
There's
classes
funding
to
for
make
that.
sure that our curriculum is current and
Mhm.
trending and.
And then to your latter question around 2 years could change a lot. When we do curriculum in a 5-year cycle, the message is we're always kind of working on curriculum, because while the standards won't change, how we teach will always improve.
Right.
And once we know something and we become more sophisticated at it, like, we incorporate that, and that's really the work of the department then. Chris?
Maybe just a thought as I'm sitting here thinking about what Joy asked. Maybe going forward, when you give us the notebook for approval for these particular disciplines or these subject areas, maybe give us a fact sheet that says how you got there from what the revisions were. That says, if it's English, the teachers went here, there, they went to Yale, they went to Harvard, they went to this workshop, you brought in this consultant, so then we know as a board what you've done to make revisions or changes.
That's a great suggestion.
idea.
Thank you, Chris.
I would love to see that, yeah. And especially those of us that are, content people.
Yeah.
That would be very helpful.
Sure.
Judy?
Okay, I have a question too. I've been thinking about what you said, in the middle school and high school, they keep in touch on what's going on. But the elementary school though, shouldn't they also be involved in a way too, though, to make sure the children have the
Absolutely.
foundation
I wasn't
for
leaving
middle
them
school?
out. I was just saying, currently, say we have a 6 through 12 social studies. So I was giving you that current example of
Oh.
actually what's happening with the curriculum leader at the middle school and the department head.
Okay, so when you do
But
math or
when
English,
we do
you
math,
include elementary?
and it's elementary, then we look at how it segues into middle school. So
Because what popped in my head too was the fact that math changed a lot from when our middle schoolers were in and they had to take the SBAC testing.
Yeah.
And they didn't have the foundation when they were in elementary school.
Right.
So I just wanted to make sure it's a good feeder program.
Yeah, and whenever new standards come up, there's always gonna be that temporary educational gap
Yeah.
between, we were taught 3 years this way, and then the standards rose and
Right.
expected something, and we're gonna have some catch-up. So we try to think about a kind of like a mid-gap, how do we kind of catch them up while we increase the standards too? Never perfect, but that's the goal.
Thank
I
you.
have another question.
Sure,
What's
Chris.
coming up this year? Like, what's coming up for curriculum renewal approval? Like,
Yeah.
what's the next, give us the next 5 off the top of your head.
Yeah, so it's K to 12 physical education, K to 12 health, 6 through 12 social studies, 6 through 8 language arts, and 9 through 12 math.
Okay.
That's the current work, and that current work will be going on now for the next year and a half.
Using this format.
Using this format, so that those groups are gonna be using this format. Don't expect to see any curriculum for adoption this spring, it will be all next spring, because everyone has chosen to really write the curriculum as a full draft form this year, and then live with the document, do the units, get some feedback, and enhance them, and then bring it to the board.
The other comment I want to make on pre-K to 12 alignment, Craig won't say it, so I'll say it, is the constant in all of this is Craig. Craig is the one, obviously, who has that pre-K to 12 lens and is obviously actively involved in that process, meeting with the folks leading this work, so.
Well, thank you. I asked some questions to the great faculty we have here, and they really move us forward. So that's stage 1. Stage 2 is really we want to think, what's the end goal? So we have the goals, we know what we're doing, and then where do we want to get to by the end of the year? So we want to think, what does it look like for students to really deeply understand? What should students be able to know? And then ideally, if you look at that third bullet, how can we be assured that students can transfer their thinking to new learning situations? Because, just to, if you will, memorize it for this particular event doesn't necessarily create deep learning and understanding. So that's really the goal. And then how that looks is we're saying, well, what summative assessment, and that gives examples of what summative assessments there should be. Those are the endpoints. We want to think about and be deliberate about what do the rubrics look like ahead of time. So the notion of like pop tests or quizzes we know is a bad practice because that's a classroom management design rather than an academic learning design. So we want to say, what's the rubrics? What's the end goal? We want to include the hyperlinks for our own faculty to have whatever resources they need to be successful in that. And then as we were teaching the units, are there any pre-assessments? And what are those formative assessment checks along the way, which may be like think alouds, exit tickets, other strategies for all teachers to be successful. And then finally, Act 3 of our third act play would be, what's the learning plan look like? So what is the kind of key elements within the unit that everyone should be able to do? We're not defining every single lesson plan. We're saying these key events. So as an example, when we did elementary social studies and the board was generous enough to expand and include some field trips, we said, well, how are those learning experience of those field trips really going to be integral into the curriculum and part of the plan? So that would be part of the goal. And then that third bullet is, how do we differentiate the learning? How do we have different scaffolded entrance points so that oral learners can achieve? And so that is the overall new format then for the unit planning. So we're going to say about how many lessons, about how long, what are the overall major objectives to this unit, what are the essential activities, and what are the resources. You'll note down below that we never want to prescribe a curriculum to fill every single day, because we know that any plan may take a little bit longer than it's delineated. So we basically ask the curriculum writers, for 180 days, plan for about estimated lessons 165. That leaves room for teacher discretion, catch up along the way. Life happens, like events at the school and everything else. So we plan for the majority of instruction, but we try not to stress everyone out to say, here's every moment pre-planned for you.
Craig,
Yes,
is
Joy.
this the first time you're incorporating backward design?
So it's this is the first time that we're incorporating all three stages. So Waterford used to do UBD when I first was an administrator here a couple decades ago, but we never brought it down to the unit plan design. And if we just did, here are the standards and here's the assessment, it wasn't enough for teachers. So we then shifted away from that to the current format that you've been used to. And now we're going back to the UBD design, but by having the unit development in here, we really feel that this will be successful. We're not an island on this. There are other districts that have been doing this for 6 or 8 years. So I've talked to those colleagues. I've gotten samples, and it's based upon, as you can see on this plan, a book by Wiggins, teaching by McTide, sorry, upgrade your teaching. So,
No, I'm very happy to see it, especially at the high school level, because backward design has been in adult learning for years and
Yes.
years and years, and it is very effective for adults. So I would say it should translate very well at the high school. So I'm excited to see that, some of that curriculum.
so the purpose of today was really to give you a kind of advance notice that when you see your next curriculum, it's gonna look different. And we've explained kind of the why and how it's gonna look different.
Great, looking forward to it.
So, one last question, or, one last one from me.
No
On
problem,
this
Marcia.
topic. When you, after you determine, the plan and everything, now that, and we approve it, that stays in place for 5 years?
It stays, yep, so the curriculum stays in place for 5 years, but it's not static. So, you know, we have departments who will continually kind of work to refine it.
That's what I was
And-
just gonna ask.
And as long as they don't really
Completely throw it out.
completely, you know, throw out the standards or make huge changes, that's encouraged
Right.
in its
Because-
refinement.
Because when you start to teach it, you're gonna tweak it a little bit
Correct.
here and a
Oh,
little
yeah,
bit there.
it has to be
and-
flexible. As
And it actually makes a better plan in the end.
Yeah.
Correct.
Because you've adjusted it to your clientele.
If there are really substantive changes, then we would bring it back to the board for your ultimate reapproval.
The other piece Craig's gonna talk about is around our assessment framework. This was a delineated objective in our strategic plan. And this is something that our district data team and our instructional coaches have worked on for about 18 months.
Yeah.
About that
Yeah.
length of time. And we really conducted a forensic audit, really, of every single assessment we were giving. Why are we giving it? Should we continue to give it? What are we using it for? All of that, so.
Thank you. So, again, just to harken back to what Tom said earlier, the strategic plan that was developed in the 16-17 school year really is driving the work. One of the work items is the creation of the DAT team, the District Data Analysis Team. And so, if we think about the why and the how. So, in your strategic plan, there was a strategic goal to get assessing progress consistent, accurate, timely manner, the use of assessments, and basically communication to all students and staff. So then the process, the DAT team conducted an assessment audit, as Tom mentioned, reviewed the relevant assessments, checked for redundancy, made recommendations to continue what assessments. That was in the 17-18 year. In the 18-19 year, there was a creation of a cycle of inquiry for PLCs to use, looking at the assessment data to drive future instruction. In the spring of this year, the instructional coaches received all of the assessment framework and put it together in this kind of nice finished product. It was reviewed by admin and then created for everyone, including yourself. So in this document, you'll see the district assessment calendar, this year's dates, the purpose of each district assessment, who's in charge of it, how the data is being used, and then when we were doing this, we also said, well, since software is tied to curriculum, here's all the district approved software, the purpose, and again, how the software should be used. So we're adding, hopefully, or continuing to add clarity on how we're using assessments, how we're using software to really move instruction forward. When it comes to assessments, I firmly believe if we're not using the data, you have to question why do we give assessment. The analogy I always say is, I don't need to weigh myself every day if I'm not either changing my diet or changing my exercise, because as fat as I am today, I'll probably be as fat tomorrow unless I do something different. So we shouldn't necessarily need to weigh ourselves unless we're doing something different, and it's really using the data. Marcia?
I have a couple of questions on the software stuff. On the Dreambox, your description of the Dreambox, is it like Mobimax and Khan Academy, basically?
So Dreambox, let me describe what Dreambox is. I'm not diverting your question, because my question is going to be sort of, which isn't necessarily a great answer for you. So that's why I'm going to determine what it is. Dreambox came into our district 4 years ago through the IDEA grant, primarily to support special education students in their learning. The Dreambox development was developed in the same process as the math workshop, and so Dreambox reinforces the skills after the constructivist investigation of a math workshop unit is done. So it's a reinforcement of the skills. So that's why it's a sort of like those other programs you mentioned, but it's not a skill necessarily catch up or just set them on it.
But it's universal. It's not just special ed. It's classroom teachers and math interventionists.
So yes, I said how it came into our district.
Oh, okay.
And then because it aligns perfectly with the math workshop model, that we know in a math workshop case, some kids construct the meaning quicker than others. This is a nice extension to that learning than for those kids who have constructed their learning. And right now, for this is the first year, it's being in every classroom as an opportunity to extend the learning as a way to manage the what could be a messy construct of a workshop.
Basically because you have multi-level ability students?
That is correct.
Okay, and so, but are we still, my issue is with Khan Academy and Mobimax.
Yep.
And then I saw Dreambox on there too.
So it's
I'm
not,
like,
that's why I said it's not an
we're going backwards instead of forwards here.
Yep, I
So,
feel I understand where you're heading with this one.
You know my feelings on those. I would like to see the teacher giving instruction, not the kids with headsets, just because they're deficient in one area or excelling in one area.
Yeah.
You need to teach the whole class and then break out.
Yeah.
But
So
I didn't get that impression by reading the descriptions of those.
So because this is new for all teachers this year, on October 11th, our first PD day, we're going to be giving explicit professional learning on the best way to use this software tool. So there's consistency and best practice being employed. And as I said, it's really to give students a further opportunity to continue with their learning when they have kind of solved the math workshop kind of task.
So a small portion of the class.
Would be on at a time, yeah.
Ideally.
It's, right, it's much more of a center than here's what the students do.
Right, and the Khan Academy is just gonna be used as supplemental material in the high school?
So I have really forensically asked middle and high school the uses of this, and so what you see there is what we're doing currently.
And
It's not what
Mobimax
we're doing,
only?
it's
Yeah.
not what we did in the past.
Right, but this
It
is what
is-
going forward,
That is correct.
and Mobimax only for special ed.
That is what I'm assured.
Thank you, Craig.
Thank you for your questions.
So, all of these programs, all of these softwares, I counted 14. How do you know that the teachers are using them? So let's just pick reading A to Z, it's pre-K to grades 1 and 2. How do you know how often these teachers are using this? So out of all those teachers, what if 4 of the teachers go, this sucks, I don't want to use it? So I have a few questions before you answer. What do we pay for all these different softwares, and how do you know they're using them? Which I'm leading to, if I'm teaching grade 2 and I don't like this particular one, reading A to Z, is it worth it for us to be spending it? How do we know that they're all using it?
Yeah, I'll tackle that initially, and then Craig can backfill. So when we begin our budget development in October, November, Ed does a deep dive on usage. All of these products have back-end usage metrics. So we are, and it's not uncommon for us to ask IT, what's the usage on this? We're paying X amount of money for this. So there's the money angle of this. Are we getting a bang for our buck? So each budget cycle, each year, we're doing usage metrics on this. And they have varying degrees of detail to that. Some of them are just total usage for the district, X amount of hours, X amount of students. Some will break it down all the way to the teacher level. Secondarily, and this is where Craig can speak more, obviously our administrators are regularly in classrooms, both coaching teachers and evaluating teachers, and our instructional coaches are also another way to ensure, it's part of the curriculum, so it centers around curriculum implementation. So there are various layers of really usage accountability on these items. In terms of cost, I don't have it memorized, but our overall software budget for the entire district, and that goes all the way from our payroll software to instructional software. It is broken out in our budget book.
Yeah, I was able to phone a friend who has a computer here, and so to answer Chris's question, of the $294,000 in our software account, $51,000 is curriculum related. So what you see in this list totals $51,000.
Thank you.
Did you have anything to add on
How you've explained it is accurate, and the only addition would be, sometimes we ask principals to say to teachers, what do you think about this? And we get that kind of anecdotal feedback as well as the analytical feedback to say, is this really necessary to continue?
My concern is I'm breaking my promise, but my concern is the opposite of Chris's. I'm afraid that they're relying on this too much, and I wanna make sure that they're teaching the concepts in human style rather than in computer style.
Yeah, when I think you look at our trajectory of academic growth over the last 4 years, I think it's indicative that there's quality instruction going on.
Thank you.
Anything else on assessment and software?
Nope.
Good, thank you, Craig. Couple other items, I'll ask my colleagues over there to do some clicking for me. I just want to briefly review for the board. We are in the 3rd year of implementation of our strategic plan. As Craig mentioned, developed 4 years ago. So one of the things that we did this past spring was really look at our action steps for this year before we head into the school year to say, the action steps we laid out for this year, 4 years ago, do they still make sense? As Craig's mentioned, sometimes a unit lesson plan looks great on paper, and when you go to implement, you're like, well, this took a lot shorter than I thought and faster. So I laid this out for staff at convocation, and thought it would be appropriate for you to take a look at what lies ahead this year in the major buckets of the strategic plan. We'll be looking to finalize our district's vision of the graduate. That really grows out of our academic, social, and civic skills, which was developed, again, almost 4 years ago now. We'll be finalizing that this year and obviously sharing that work with the board. But that's really a set of skills that no matter the content area, what are those core skills, such as communication, thinking critically and creatively, being able to research something, being able to argue from a point of view, those sorts of things. What are those skills regardless of content? Do we want every 12th grader leaving Waterford schools with? Craig covered this very well, including what are those hot skills and vision of the graduate skills into our curricula. We continue with our rubric analysis and development. Last year we did a deep dive, and I know Joy, you've asked questions about rubrics in the past. We did a deep dive, really collecting every rubric we're using in the district. Are they consistent across a grade level or a content area? If they're not, which one is the best? We'll begin to pull the best from each of those, and we'll say, where do we still need rubrics? One of those, obviously, is our vision of the graduate skills. We'll need to build pre-K to 12 rubrics on that, and we'll be engaging Great Schools Partnership in that work. The other part of this is to really begin to draft the district dashboard, and I spoke at convocation to staff about this. We have a lot of metrics which we're forced to measure, and they're all important: chronic absenteeism, obviously SBAC and SATs, and all of those things. But what are those other things that we value as a district? And that'll be a collective discussion as a district. Do we care about the percent of kids involved in after-school activities and sports? Is that important to us? Are we concerned with the amount of freshmen in college out of Waterford Higher taking remedial courses? Is that important to us? So those types of discussions and really developing what are those things beyond the state mandated metrics we're forced to measure and should be measuring. What else is important? Next slide. Really continuing, really the refinement, enhancement of PLCs. We know we cannot accomplish all that we need accomplished without effective teacher teams collaborating, and they are effective and they're doing great work. But really driving them to discussions around what are those next steps in instruction. Okay, we have the data, we've made assumptions about that data, we've made conclusions about that data. Now, how are we gonna change what we do tomorrow in the classroom? Really continuing our work in PLCs of that. Another piece of this, and this was a budgetary piece last year, there's been a lot of back-end work on our district data warehouse. So when you look at an assessment document that's 10 pages long with, I didn't count the number of assessments, but it's lengthy. Currently those are all housed in separate buckets, bringing it under one roof so a teacher can say, well, I wanna see how this one student did on math, SBAC, what are their grades, and oh, by the way, is it being affected by attendance? Right now, that's 4 different sources. This will bring it under one roof, one source. They'll have a picture of their whole class. Principals will have pictures of their whole school, as well as individual student data. It is huge, and it's a huge project to get all data with data integrity in one place. But administration was trained this summer on it, and staff will be trained on November 5th for an initial training, and then personalized training throughout the course of the year. Continued work, I know the policy subcommittee of the board has been busy and will continue to be busy. One bucket of work will be, once we get our policy manual this year where it needs to be, begin looking at, are there inconsistencies between policies and what's happening in schools and classrooms? And this isn't happening here, but I'll give you an example. There are districts that don't have a bring your own device policy, but kids are allowed to bring their device every day. That would be an inconsistency between policy. That's not an issue here. But we'll be looking for those types of inconsistencies between what does the policy say and what the practice is. And many times, the practice can inform a better policy.
Like the bugs with there's a school that didn't have a policy on the bugs here in the state, and they settled for $400,000. And if they had in the policy use bug spray, they would have saved $400,000. So you're correct.
Excellent example.
You're in
And one that's high stakes. The other thing that the DAT team, our district analysis and action team, will do next spring, so spring of 20, about 8 or 9 months from now, is really doing kind of a self-audit. Where are we as a district after 3 full years of implementation of the strategic plan? each of the indicators in the strategic plan was initially put on a four, I don't wanna call it points, cause there's no numbers, but a scale of 4 levels from present state, so 4 years ago, the steering committee for the strategic plan defined what's present in our district right now for each of these metrics, what does beginning progression look like, what is progressing, and what does accomplishing look like. So we'll be doing a self-audit, kind of as a district, and that will really inform the next 2 years of action steps. It is a 5-year strategic plan, with 3 years of bona fide action steps, because to write steps 5 years out is probably not a great use of time in that first year when you're trying to project 6 years ahead. So we wrote 3 years of action steps. We'll take a self-audit and say, where are we and what do the next 2 years of work look like before we would consider really an overhaul, refinement of the existing strategic plan. So that's a preview of items you'll be hearing throughout the year at various intervals and ways, including here at board meetings. Any questions about strategic plan work for the upcoming year? Okay, other items of note, it's the first meeting of the school year, so there's a lot to cover. Wanted to provide you with a softball field update. You heard at the last board meeting that the softball committee met before the last board meeting and made a decision to rebid site work and scoreboard. Those bids came in yesterday, and Joe is here with an update.
Sure, so bids came back, was not exactly the best news that we were hoping for. So bids came in about $7,000 less than last time. So if you recall, we have gone through a relatively long process with this. Originally starting off with a location on this property with the renovation of Vets Field. Ultimately, the subcommittee decided to put an AstroTurf field over at the high school. During the budget process, you recall, we asked for $1 million. The amount was reduced to about $450,000. Right now, the amount that's going to go forward to the Board of Selectmen and Board of Finance is roughly $1 million, and that's for an AstroTurf field without lights. It does include $90,000 worth of contingency. It is a big ask, it's a big push, but it seems like there's enough community support to go forward. This is a nice turf field. Actually, it'll be beautiful, and it should last for a long time.
Yeah, and I think it's important to let people know that this is a multi-purpose field. This is not a field solely dedicated for softball. 'Cause I think that number, even though we were very much for the 1 million, because we knew what we were designing, and I'm not quite sure that who's gonna pay for this is aware of that amount of detail.
Yeah, you bring up an excellent point. I've been asked, attending various district events, including back to school nights, people have said, well, can't we just put grass and that would
Right.
save $250,000? The issue is that this needs to be a year-round field. We're taking
Exactly.
away a year-round field by putting the softball field in that location, and it does need to be multi-purpose. Boys
Yes.
and girls soccer will use that as a practice field. Field hockey will use that as a practice field. And I know Joe has, we've met with.
Literally hit the two on my list.
This needs to be a year-round, multi-purpose field. Grass, it will get torn up, and it will defeat the
Yeah.
purpose of ever building the field. So if there's a movement, or a will to go grass, my recommendation would be not to build the field in that location, because natural grass is not gonna work in that location. We will have spent $750,000 for a grass field that is not going to be at the level that it needs to be.
Yeah, and it's not just the amount of money it costs. If you put in a grass field, yes, it may be cheaper to actually install it, but it's more expensive to maintain it in the long run. So, I hope people understand all the soft costs associated with this budget as well, so that $1 million is easier to swallow.
We should make sure that all that information is in with, the costs when we meet with the RTM and Board of Finance. Now, do we have a date in mind when we're gonna do this, or?
RTM has a regularly scheduled meeting on the 7th of October.
Okay.
Do
Do you want it before that, though?
What's that?
Do we wanna meet before that?
I don't know that, I think the direction from the softball committee was clear last time in that we were gonna rebid and go forward
And
with
just
those
go.
numbers, so, we'll be sending, a memo, to the first selectman on behalf of the softball committee, saying we'd like to get on, an agenda, keeping in mind that RTM meets on the 7th, cause it has to go selectmen first, then Board of Finance, and then RTM in that order.
Weren't we gonna ask for a joint meeting?
I think
I
there is
thought-
some talk about a selectmen Board of Finance joint meeting and then getting it to the RTM on October 7th.
Okay.
So, those are kind of the next steps. Happy to answer any other questions, as is Joe.
Let's do it. I mean, we
Yeah.
have to.
Yeah, after, it will be going to them as soon as tomorrow.
So, as you guys mentioned, the important talking points are that the field will be used year-round.
Mhm.
It
And we have to put it in writing so they could
Yeah.
read it, because sometimes I think it just goes through their heads, they don't remember,
Okay.
they just don't remember. So as long as it's in writing, they'll have it in front of them, and I think, you know, Joy's point is excellent, I mean, it is gonna be a multi-use field, it's not, because some people were upset, they said we're taking away practice
Right,
fields, well, we're
exactly.
not, we're gonna
We're
make
not.
the practice field even better, because they play
Right.
on turf,
Exactly.
so they'll get to practice on turf too, so. Then Rec and Parks can use it over the summer, I mean, it's,
Yeah.
I know it's expensive, but
Certainly be-
I think it's well worth it,
Right.
and the girls deserve it.
They
Tom,
do.
You have some other items?
Sure. Just wanna say all 5 schools had very successful back-to-school nights, were well-attended. Received some parent emails how well-organized they were, so kudos to our team for organizing those. Want to provide you with a brief update on food services. We have posted the Director of School Dining and Nutrition Services. We've renamed that position.
Ooh, I like that.
I like it.
That position closes September 27th. Interviews will commence in October, and we're hoping for a start date of early November for the successful candidate. We're already getting positive feedback from parents and students about many
Great.
changes already.
I went to the back-to-school night at the schools, and I got a chance to talk to Diane, I think, over at Great Neck. I love the way she had everything all set up in the cafeteria for the students. It was really good, and very healthy meals, and I love the way that they changed the names to some of the
Mhm.
meals, because it's more inviting. I think they just
Yeah.
sound better, so that's good.
Want to just, many of you were able to attend the Waterford Community Conversation last Thursday at the Waterford Library. So we had great representation from the district and the board there. I was contacted earlier this week by the Chief Performance Officer of the Connecticut State Department of Education, Ajit Gopalakrishna. So he is in charge of all standardized testing and performance and accountability metrics, and based on our middle school math scores, the state wants to come down and see illustrative math in action, and they want
That's
our
great.
team to present at a statewide conference on October 17th.
Wow,
We saw
Excellent.
substantial gains, which you'll get
come a long way.
Yeah.
a full report.
Good job.
Yes, you'll get a full report at the October board meeting, but kudos to our middle school team for that, and certainly we'll make the board aware when they visit, and if people wanna tag along.
Yeah, I'd like to see it.
Yeah, I would
so
too. Sure.
really interesting, so proud of our folks. Oswegatchie received almost $10,000 in grants this month. They received an $8,000 grant from the Barnes Foundation to continue their Artist in Residence program, so congratulations, Mr. Macrino. And they also tapped into the Stop and Shop A+ Rewards program for an additional $1,500. So, great news. You might have saw, and you have in front of you, an article about a best-selling children's author, internationally known author, Susan Verde, launched her latest book in the Waterford Public Schools at Great Neck and Oswegatchie. Your latest book, I Am Love, really about having compassion for others, and just a great extension of the SEL work we're doing on developing kids' emotional intelligence. We are in the midst of mosquito mania.
Yes.
So, Monday morning, Chris Landry and I worked together after consulting a variety of resources, including the State Department of Public Health as well as Ledge Lake Health District, and we are shutting down outside activities a half hour before sunset, which is, I learned there's a distinction between sunset and dusk.
Yes.
So there's new learning in this for me. Dusk is actually later than sunset. So the recommendation was to shut down at dusk. We're shutting down a half hour before sunset. So that is in effect until further notice. They say a hard freeze should take care of it, but almost this morning, so parts of the state had a freeze. Busy week. Our district data team met this week. Professional Learning and Evaluation Committee met this week, so things are up and running. Somebody asked that. I says it feels like day 50 already, but we're really humming right along. Fall sports are underway at the middle school and high school, albeit earlier game times. We will have Senior Services Day in the Waterford Public Schools on October 22nd, so we're collaborating with the Waterford Senior Service Center about giving seniors tours of our schools, and they want to do one school a year, and they chose the high school, so we'll be touring the high school on the morning of October 22nd. And save the date, our annual Parent Academy will be Tuesday evening, October 29th, focusing on a keynote around school safety, and then breakouts offered by our esteemed staff. So more to come on that as well. And it was a long report. It's
Welcome, Tom.
concluded.
Thank you. Are there any Board of Education committee reports?
I have a policy.
Very good.
Policy committee met and we approved renumbering of the 1000 series to remove the decimals and consolidate the policies. And then we added Project Safeguard grant to the policy 1210 to 1030 and which is relations with parent organizations. We also approved the 2000-3000 series policy renumbering. They're currently being revised. And you have those in your packet.
Thank you. Any other board committee reports?
I have learned.
Okay, well, that'll be under B. Board of Education liaison or representative reports. Chris?
Learn did a new technology plan for the Preston public school system. They also announced a workers' compensation trust that they were qualified for to receive a premium of return of $31,000. They announced that they have 2,480 students from 78 towns. There's a new executive director, Kate Erickson. They hired a new deputy executive director, Bridget Gordon-Hickey. They hired a new person for teaching and learning, an associate executive director, Dr. Ryan Dolan, and a new director of curriculum and instruction, Dr. Susan Iwanicki. And they established a new communications team. They had a convocation video that they showed us that was good. They announced they have 600 employees there starting the school year, and that's about it.
Thanks, Chris.
You're welcome.
Jody, anything from youth services?
Yes, I just have a few things. Camp Dash went very well, and Danny gave me some figures. We had 71 volunteers of our middle school and high school students, and we had 25 to 30 camp counselors also, and most of them want to come back next year. They had pre-K, the pre-K program. The pre-K students were a challenge because there were more pre-K students than other age groups, so they're going to revisit the way everything is set up. They're offering the trip to New York to see Frozen, and that's almost all full. They're starting the after-school programs next week, and those are mostly full already too. Danny was able to secure some grants. She has a $5,000 grant that they have for opioid addiction, and they're talking about maybe doing a drug take-back day with some of that money. And Bouvier Insurance Agency, which I didn't even realize they were in Waterford, they donated $2,500 to the food locker.
Oh, wow.
So that's going to help a lot. There's been a big demand at the food locker lately. And let's see. Also, we're starting a veterans coffee house, and Jim Reed is he's the driving force behind this. I'm just helping him, but It's gonna be on the second Tuesday of every month at Youth Service Bureau. We had a hard time finding a place for it, but, it's gonna be upstairs because there's an elevator, so the veterans will be able to get, because there's a lot of older people, the veterans will be able to get upstairs easily. But it's gonna be from 9 to 11, and what we're doing is, Emma Tyler put together, she's an intern over at Youth Service Bureau this year. She put together a pamphlet with all of the different agencies for veterans to contact for their needs. And what we wanna do too is some of us, we're gonna help them fill out the forms, because the forms are so cumbersome. I don't know why the government has to make them that way. But we wanna help them that way, and also it'll just be a place for, veterans to get together, you know, once a month. Waterford is one of the few towns that didn't have anything for our veterans. So we visited, New London and Norwich and Groton, and, ours is gonna be similar to that, but we're not going through TVCCA, we're gonna do it ourselves through our town. So that should be good. But you're welcome to come and visit if you'd like. It's on the second Tuesday of every month from 9 to 11, upstairs at Youth Service Bureau. Let's see, I think that's pretty much it. And then like, they could always take, if you have any donations for the food locker, they could always do that. Oh, and then Danny wanted to make you aware of the fact that at East Lyme, they're gonna have a suicide prevention, workshop, and it's at 7 o'clock on September 30th, if anybody would like to go to that.
The theme is youth suicide.
Yeah.
Thank you, Julie.
You're welcome.
Okay, I don't think there are any other liaison or representative reports, and I don't see any liaisons or representatives from other bodies to this board, so I think we can go right to new business. Discussion and possible action on our board goals. We have them in our packet. What's the pleasure of the board?
I'd like to add a couple of goals. I don't know how many goals we wanna have, but, one of the ones I would like to add is that we've had school surveys over the last few years, and, although they are not 100% participation by the staff, I think they're still meaningful. And to me, I think we need to improve school climate in the middle school and high school, and I think we need a better way of tracking that school climate and discipline issues. So I would like to, I don't know how we wanna word it, but I would like to improve and track school climate and discipline issues in the middle school and high school. That's one of the goals.
How do we know, or what makes us think that school climate's down?
If you read the surveys, from last year, the year before, school climate issues were really passionate, reading all those comments. This year, the surveys were not very well, filled out, and there's only, out of the entire staff, only one person wrote a comment. But the people who did fill out those surveys, it indicated that there was not, from those surveys is where I got my information. And granted, it may not be totally valid, but I think it's something that we need to investigate, because certainly the year before, there was a big issue with that. And, this year, I don't know how valid those surveys were, but it indicated a similar pattern. And I'm concerned about that.
Were we shared this year's surveys? I don't.
Yes.
A while ago, over the summer, I think. The end of the
These
summer.
are ultimately the board's goals, obviously. You know, I'm not disagreeing with anything that was said, but these are things that are within the board's control and purview,
Okay.
as opposed to certainly, board evaluates me, and if there's direction from the board that are an administrative function, that's, so, but I think, and I'll ultimately defer to the board and the chair, but these are things that should be within the board's goals and can accomplish in the context of board meetings and board subcommittee meetings. So.
Is there a way for the board, is it to, to improve school climate and staff feelings, isn't that part of our responsibility too? Because certainly it impacts education.
I'm not saying it's not
Yeah.
a responsibility, but is it the board's responsibility and ability to control that environment, or is that an administrative function?
I
That's-
get So, but could we as a board figure out a way to maybe make the surveys more meaningful by having a higher percentage? You and I spoke about this a while ago, Tom, and you said that the state's mandating that surveys be part of the regular, work of every school now, right?
Yes, there was legislation passed that there'll be a state-issued staff survey.
So
In several years, it's.
right, so can we as a board do something to improve the participation rate of those surveys, thereby improving the validity of the surveys?
Well, why don't we just add it to the third bullet? So instead of promoting mental health and reducing stress among students, why don't we add faculty to that? And then the administration will have to come up with a plan.
Well, we wanna support a positive school environment. So it would seem to me that wouldn't cross the line between policy and administration. So if our goal is to support positive school environments, positive school climates, whatever the word of choice may be today, I think that would fit within the model.
I like that, support, positive school climate.
Jody?
Yeah, because I feel the administration's doing that, because they're doing that already. Because, for instance, Clark Lane, the students are taking part into the Walk for Safe Futures. It's Spirit Week at the high school next week. I think, I know I read the surveys too, and I was really surprised by it, because I'm at a lot of the, granted it's basketball games or football games, but I try to get into the schools when I can, and I don't see, the kids seem happy, the students seem happy to be there.
This wasn't about the kids.
No,
This
the
was
parents,
about-
no,
no,
the
this is
teachers?
staff.
Teachers.
Staff.
See, I didn't see that either. Okay.
Part of the issue is the response rate is very low. We're looking
Yeah.
at about 27%.
Oh, I'm sorry, I misunderstood. I thought you
response
meant
rate.
the parents, that survey, yeah.
So definitely participation, and we worked with the union last year to
Mm.
redesign the survey and
Yeah.
whatnot, so participation on that is a
Yeah.
challenge.
So could I add then, support school climate? How did you phrase that again, please, Craig? You were
So
a
I,
wordsmith.
support positive school climate was the last thing I heard from the board chair.
That's
that not readable?
That's the idea, and our wordsmiths can parse it, what a motion would be, the way we add it to these goals. Or we'll have, just add it, and we'll have a formal motion to approve all the goals.
Yeah.
If we wanna tinker with the words, we can.
Okay. Does that capture,
Do we need to say,
because that's an
In all
overall
s-
statement, so that
in
would be
all schools?
inclusive of faculty, certainly. I'm sorry,
I like that, support, positive school climate.
okay,
That,
Might wanna put A.
thank you.
that covers pretty much what I was talking about.
Okay, any other, comments or reflections on the, goals in front of us? Jody?
I'm just really happy to see bullet 4, engage families, because I think that's really important.
I did have one other, do we need to put something in there about what we've done with CREC and the consult that we incorporated with the cafeteria? Or do we leave, is that within our purview, or do we leave that alone? I think it's great, I think what's happening right now is
Mm.
fantastic.
Mm.
I just would like to see some kind of way to track it and make sure it stays on track.
Isn't that under the last bullet?
Support budget process, budget. It's not just about savings and efficiencies, it's more about satisfaction in my, mine wasn't purely budgetary, mine was, you know, satisfying the kids' appetites. I don't know, you know, I just thought it's something that it's a new issue we're tackling. It seems to be very successful, but if there were some way to find out, is it successful or isn't it successful? that would
Can I actually comment on that just a little bit?
Yeah.
You're essentially putting a board goal on one individual's performance,
Okay.
right? Because we're gonna be hiring a new food service
okay.
director. Tom has a better title. That would be a tough one,
Okay,
in my personal opinion.
okay.
Certainly, it will be administration's goal to update you throughout the year on the developments and
And
our
we'll bring
progress
them
on the
here.
correct
Okay.
report, but it's definitely a priority.
Yeah.
So that's a really good point.
Jody?
Should we have anything in there about the NESDAQ evaluation for the high school, you know, to support the high school with, or we don't need it?
We're still a year, I mean, certainly it's a priority when we talk about, you know, it probably falls mostly under the 5th bullet. Craig, could you scroll up just one?
Of course.
The one on teaching and learning? No, too far. Assess the district's growth and progress using a variety of assessments, information, and evidence, and data to ultimately improve teaching and learning. I mean, ultimately, the reason we're all here is so kids learn. Again, I can assure you that successful accreditation is a priority. Certainly, if we wanted to add it to that bullet, something along the lines of, and successful NEASC
I don't know
accreditation.
that
Yes.
we wanna create a bill of particulars as opposed to general goals.
Okay, well, no, just that evaluation comes up every 10 years, you know, and,
Our visit
I
is
just wanted to
December of 2020, so we're
Yeah.
about 16
Maybe
months
next-
out.
okay.
Anyone else?
Stretching that.
So are we ready to have a motion to approve the goals with the addition of the support a positive school climate bullet?
So moved.
Second?
Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Okay, next will be a discussion and possible action concerning the Waterford Public Schools professional learning and evaluation plan from this minute.
Little background on that is our professional learning and evaluation committee last year undertook several revisions. We informed the board about that last spring. The process is, we actually have to get state approval before your approval, which to me seems backwards. But we've received state approval on that. We provided you with a red line version. The changes are not major. We wanted to update to the latest rubric on teaching and learning, expectation of teachers. There were some revisions about tenured staff. Some of the feedback has been on the tenure track folks from administration, was one point of view in terms of wanting to see a full lesson from beginning to end, and adding that every 3rd year. And then there was some language changes around support for new teachers as well. Craig?
Yeah, I think page 11 of the plan, that chart really delineates the explanation Tom was saying around, we're gonna have tenured teachers have a 3-year cycle. One year, they would have to do a full comprehensive eval, meaning a pre-observation lesson, a lesson, and then a post-observation conference so that we could see planning in action. And then year 2 and 3, it would be a series of mini informal observations instead. And so
Which is
that's
what we have now.
which is what we have now.
Yeah.
So that's a subtle enhancement to see the planning aspect, which is a full domain of the teacher evaluation rubric. And then our plan still had references to the state summative testing being used in the SLO creation, and we know that the state's peak committee disallowed that, so we had to remove that antiquated language as well.
I always hear, you know, that it's very hard to do a lot of this, as an administrator, it's hard to get around to all the assessments. Do we have enough for everybody to split the pieces up between all the administrators and get it done?
Yeah, so the average caseload of an administrator to evaluate ranges between 28 and 33. So with that, we consciously make sure that every administrator gets an equitable load. And, you know, if there's a lot of new teachers, then obviously there's a little more work with the induction, but it's our goal to use the teacher evaluation plan as a form of instructional coaching. So every teacher should feel that when they're getting observed, informally or formally, it's really just to have that professional discussion of how can we make slight changes to continually improve.
I agree with you 100%. I think there is no greater job of an administrator than to teach his staff, to be a mentor and a guide to the staff.
Anyone else? If I have a motion to approve the plan as presented.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It passed unanimously. Okay, review and possible action on policy relocation in series.
So, there are three components to this tonight. As articulated by Marcia in the subcommittee meeting, we are doing a full policy review. That was also validated by Tom's review of the strategic plan goal to really do a deep dive in all policies. So with that, we have moved some policies to the categories they probably should be in. So when we talk about access to news media to the Board of Ed meetings, currently that's in our 1000 series, but anything board related should be in our bylaws. Same with public participation of board meetings. That's in our 1000 series, needs to be moved to our bylaws. A policy that we'll be taking up tonight around parent organizations is being renumbered to our 1000. The school, let me see, gifts for school personnel is being moved from 1000 to 4000, and then we're gonna also have a bylaw component in the 9000. And then the fundraising, instead of in kind of an administrative function, it really should be, fundraising is really around what we do with students, so we're moving that to the 5000 series. Same with moving some things from the 3000 series into the 1 or the 5000. Transportation should be moved into the student section, and pesticides and green cleaning should be moved into the 1000. So the first sort of action tonight is to save our current policies by just moving them to the right series of the policy manual. And then we'll be taking action to renumber several series tonight. The policy committee looked at the 1000, 2000, and 3000 series. We're gonna do it in 4 chunks. And then they'll next look at the 4000 and 7000 series, 5 and 6, and then finally the bylaws, which is the 9000 series. So we're renumbering them, putting them in a correct sequence and getting rid of any decimal places. And then we'll take a look at a policy, as Marcia also mentioned in her report. So the first action we're looking tonight is just to, so we don't lose these policies when we approve the new numbering, to move them into the correct series.
We have a with policies, we like to be specific, and we have a recommended motion in our package if someone would care to
I'll read it.
go ahead.
The Waterford Board of Education approves the relocation of
This is
policy.
your motion.
I'd like to move that the Waterford Board of Education approves the relocation of policy 1112, access by news media to the Board of Ed meetings, to the 9000 series, policy 1120, public participation of Board of Ed meetings, to the 9000 series, policy 1230, other school-connected organizations, boosters, clubs, to the 5000 series, policy 1313, gifts to school personnel, moved to series 4000 and 9000, policy 1324, fundraising activities to the 5000 series, and policy 3524.2, green cleaning program to the 1000 series, and policy 3541, transportation to the 5000 series, and policy 3524.1, pesticide application on school property to the 1000 series.
Thank you, Rich. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion is approved unanimously.
The next action, at your last meeting, we looked at the 1000, 2000, 3000 series to see if there were policies that were not needed because they're sitting in other places. We took action to delete them. So this is the reorganization and the new numbering of the policies in these three series.
Would you like a motion for that one?
Yes, please.
I'd like to move that the Waterford Board of Education approves the policy sequence revisions for series 1000, 2000, and 3000 as proposed.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously.
And our final action with respect to policy would be that in the community relations, with respect to parent organizations, we've added some clarity of what are the parent organizations within our Waterford community and how there is a nexus to the Board of Ed. So that's what's up for first reading tonight, if there's any questions.
Comments, suggestions?
That's the one where we added the St. Brad group to the list.
Okay, we'll act on it next meeting. I think we're now at that point where we can have a motion to adjourn. Is
So moved.
there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Say
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned.
Thomas.